What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to channel Musu Gaming here, and today I'll be doing the best commander tier list prediction based on how I predict Qin Shi Huang and Shapur the First will do on the field, as well as Rally and Garrison meta in Rise of Kingdoms. Now, along with that, I'll be doing some detailed math that will go into how Qin Shi Huang's damage factor will work, because that will be critical in how I tier Qin Shi Huang into this tier list. So please stick around for more information about that as well. But first, let's go over the tier maker as well. So each tier has different standards so that people who are watching this video will be able to understand, hey, like, why is this commander not in the S plus tier, S tier, A tier, B tier, and so forth. So let's just go ahead and read what I wrote for each tier. S plus tier, this is the best commander of each type. So what that means is that there will be only one commander that can actually make it to S plus tier per each troop type. So as you can see right here, I only have one commander for infantry, cavalry, leadership, and archer, right? And then the S tier would actually mean that you can actually pair with the S plus tier to make the best commander pairing for that troop type. For example, Liu Che by Chu, the best commander pairing for infantry right now. Ho Chu Bing with Arthur, the best commander pairing for cavalry. And then Zhuge Liang with Herman Prime, best archer commander pairing for archer, right? So it's very, very easy for you to kind of read that S plus and S tier means that if you have to make one best march for that troop type, you only need to look at S plus and S tier, right? I've actually also made the mistake of putting two different commanders of engineering commanders in here. I think I can basically make one of them S plus tier and then just move on, just so that it follows all the standards. But yeah, we'll go ahead and make that revisions today. And then A tier commander means that it is the meta commanders. That means that they can be either used as a part of your first march into your best troop, like for each troop. For example, William Wallace with Bai Chu can be the strongest march that you have for infantry. And then all the other commanders will basically have the same standard for that. It can be used as either the best first march that you can possibly have for that troop type, or the second best commander pairing that you can have for that troop type. So that's what A tier means for that tier. Meta commanders. It can be used as a meta commanders. We will consider these commanders meta because it is part of your 2-march lineup for that troop type. If you're using 5 marches in the field, you will have to use those commanders. Is basically what the thought process is behind the A tier commanders. Now, B tier commanders mean that if you're making, let's say, 2.5 or 3 marches for that commander troop type. For example, if you're using 3 troops for infantry, but you're going to use Liu Che with Philip, which is kind of a half infantry, but also an infantry march, right? And then William Wallace with Bai Chu, and then Ragnar Prime with Scipio Prime. Those are like the goated 3 different marches that you can possibly run in infantry, right? So all of those commanders can be found in S plus to B tier, basically. Pretty simple, right? And then we'll go into meta and rally garrison line, which means that the commander on the leftmost part of this tier list will be the number 1 commander that I can possibly kind of suggest for meta rally and garrison. And the commanders on the rightmost will be, this commander is used right now in the meta, but unfortunately, the power level of that commander is not really there for us. So that's basically what this means. And before Season of Conquest only are just basically the Season of Conquest, before Season of Conquest only commanders that you can use. Some of those today will actually get moved up to the meta, just for your information, just because of how Qin Shi Huang and Shapur the First will change the meta, and I'll go over a little bit of why that's the case. And after that, it goes down to C tier. C tier means that it is usable but not meta. For example, Justinian is a perfect example of usable but not meta commander. You can still run skill damage rally for cavalry, but not meta, not recommended at all. Same with some of the other commanders that are here. Dido, the same way. Yanziska, when I made this commander tier list, was not really usable because Eleanor Hera was the best meta garrison for cavalry, right? So yeah, so that's basically what that means. And then D means trash. Do not use those commanders. Do not use those commanders. Do not use those commanders, like at all costs. And then F means Lubu. If you're using these commanders, or like if you have those commanders, maybe with the exception of Charlemagne here, like if you have those commanders, your money or whatever you invested in for these commanders are wasted, is what that means. So, well, that was a pretty in-depth overview of what this tier list means. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. And let's start from the easy one, Shapur the First. I think Shapur the First will change the meta rallying garrison severely. And I'll actually move him at the very left corner of Shapur the First. Now, the reason for that, and for those of you who are not really up to date on the meta rallying garrison, or rallying garrison meta, I will say, is that most of the commanders that are currently used as meta garrison and meta rally, meta garrison, will be having at least some sort of shielding effect built into their kit. For example, Gorgo has some shielding going on to his kit. Hercules had massive shielding dependency on his kit. And Tokugawa also had a massive shielding built into his kit as well. So the fact that Shapur the First will counter every single one of those meta garrison that had shield will just be able to make at the very top of the list as the meta rallying garrison commander. Now, with all that said though, I think it is fair for us to say that that Hera gets moved down quite significantly down the list. And I'll actually put Hera right above Henry. And the reason for that is simple. Hera has 1200 damage factor Mighty Shield on his active skill. He also had, I think, 400 or 500 damage factor, depending on whether you're garrisoning your city or something that you're, or objective. So that's 1700 damage factor that he cannot use from Mighty Shielding. But on top of that, though, Hera also has, I think, the third skill or fourth skill that only triggers, it does, I think, 1200 damage factor of skill damage, that only triggers if he has a shield. So with all of that shield dependency, previously Hera was able to be used with anything that like each troop can have, right? So for example, we were able to run Gorgo Hera, we were able to run Choyong Hera, we were able to run Eleanor Hera. All those commanders pairings were very, very strong meta garrison for each troop type. But now, because Shapur the First hard counters any kind of shielding mechanism, I think Hera does deserve a spot down here, right in front of Henry. Now, the reason why I didn't put him down all the way is because there will not be a meta where you only rally with archers, right? For example, if someone's rallying with Attila Subutai, then Hera still can be used, right? If someone's rallying with infantry, then Hera still can be used. So I'll still move him down, but not so much that he actually sits like in the middle of this tier list. Now, with all that said, I don't think Gorgo is gonna come out of meta. I think Gorgo Tokugawa will still be the number one garrison. It will just be hard countered by this. So anything that is not Shapur, Ashurbanipal, because again, like we'll still see Attila Subutai rallies, right? So Attila Subutai rally will be hard countered by Gorgo Tokugawa. And let's say anything infantry, that will still all be countered hard by Gorgo Tokugawa. And a portion of Tokugawa's kit is actually doing a lot of smite damage too. And after seeing how Gorgo Tokugawa works with pincer and how powerful their kit is, I'm actually not hesitant to move Tokugawa up all the way to right next to Subutai. I think if Subutai had a better combo damage dealing pairing, maybe the situation will be different. So I still would put Subutai up here, but I think Tokugawa was just so powerful with pincer in the last couple KVKs. Again, maybe I'll change my mind once I see Shapur in the action, but despite Tokugawa having some shielding mechanism in him, I think Tokugawa does deserve a spot right here. Or a little bit of bump up right there. Now, all that said though, I think Ashurbanipal deserves to move up all the way next to Gorgo. Now, the reason for that is, for one, Shapur has a lot of mechanism that works well with random buffing or constant buffing that comes from the rally. And Ashurbanipal is the only commander in Archer, I think. Henry does not really have those like temporary buffs that he can provide. So Ashurbanipal is the only commander that can actually fulfill those requirements to actually unlock the full potential of Shapur the First's rally. So with all that said, I think Shapur Ashurbanipal will be the most meta rally in Rise of Kingdoms in the upcoming meta, with the release of Shapur the First and Ashurbanipal into the game. So that's why I moved Ashurbanipal right next to Gorgo. I don't think Ashurbanipal as a single-handed commander will be stronger than Gorgo, but Ashurbanipal, because of how much amplification that he's going to get as a rally commander with Shapur the First, I think he deserves this third slot right here in the tier list. Now, would I make any other changes to this tier list? And in fact, what I'll do, and this may sound crazy in 2025, I'll actually move Yanziska all the way up here into Meta Garrison Rally Commander section. I'll move Daido back into Meta Rally and Garrison Commander tier list here. And the reason for that is, for one, Daido has some skill damage reduction mechanism built into her kit. And also at the same time, she does not do any sort of shielding in her kit. So with all that said, it is possible that Daido Choyoung might be able to fight give Shapur and Ashurbanipal a little bit of fight if paired correctly. And I think people will be pairing Choyoung with Daido, and I think that possibly could be one of the ways to actually defend against Shapur and Ashurbanipal rally. So I'll actually move Daido up all the way right next to Tar given Xian. It's not what Daido does that is really making things powerful, but it's just how the mechanism and rock paper scissors work with Shapur the First and Ashurbanipal is what was buffing Daido. So that's why I put Daido all the way up here. Now Yanziska, because Eleanor has lost her best pairing to counter the Shapur the First and Ashurbanipal, Yanziska actually comes into the picture again, because both of them doing a lot of skill damage factor into the rally might be the only chance that cavalry can actually have against that rally. So either Dido with Choyoung or Eleanor and Yan Zizkao will be used, I think, to kind of counter that rally in at the end of the day is my personal opinion on how we can fight against Shapur the First and Ashurbanipal. Now, to be fair, let me just be clear on this. I'm not saying that Eleanor Yanziska will beat Shapur the First and Ashurbanipal rally. I'm just saying that it will be able to give it a fight more so than, let's say, Eleanor and Hera was able to do, let's say, with Shapur the First and Ashurbanipal. So I'm gonna actually move Yanziska up right next to Dido. Again, it's not what those commanders do, and it's not how strong those commanders are, but just in terms of meta and how to just be able to give it a little fight against that Shapur and Ashurbanipal rally is what's pushing them up in the tier, is what I'm saying. With all that said, I will move actually Eleanor up a little bit more, right above Henry. Maybe it's tough to say, but maybe up to where Hera is, because Eleanor has no countermeasures that will be countered by this Ashurbanipal and Shapur the First rally. And I'm not sure if Eleanor will be able to beat Choyoung. Will she be able to outperform Choyoung? Well, she might be able to, given that she's a cavalry rally. And the fact that you can actually fight against the meta rally, I think does bump Eleanor up a little more. So I'll actually bump Eleanor up all the way right above Choyoung. Again, nowhere near where Gorgo and Tokugawa Ieyasu was, but I think Eleanor does get that buff because of how much Hera is nerfed. Yeah, so I'll actually bump Eleanor up all the way here. And Henry, I'll actually move Henry down all the way down to below Attila Subutai. Attila. And the reason for that is, for one, Henry, again, like I said, does not have any bluffing mechanism that would actually be able to pair well with Shapur the First. So Shapur the First will not be able to utilize full set of his kit if he's used with Henry. With that said, though, Henry does have a lot of, I think, counterattack damage, the anti-swarm mechanism. So if you're expecting a massive swarm, you might still be able to use Henry, but it's not really going to be as meta as it used to be before, where Henry and Ashurbanipal were the two best archer rally pairing that you can use in Rise of Kingdoms. So I'm going to move Henry down all the way to the very last slot of meta rally and garrison. I might actually move him down to C tier after the release of Shapur and Ashurbanipal. We'll have to see. But I think this pair is pretty much fixed. Ashurbanipal with Shapur the First. So yeah, so that's basically how I think the meta and meta rally garrison will change. I don't think any of those other commanders will really come into the game again. But yeah, that's how I think that introduction of Shapur will change the meta garrison rally garrison meta in Rise of Kingdoms. Well, I thought that was going to be easy, but that took a long time. So let's just go ahead and jump right into our main dish right here, Qin Shi Huang. And I know a lot of you are going to hate me for this, but I'll do the math for you. Qin Shi Huang is going to be the very first slot of this tier list. S plus, very left side of the S plus, is going to be outperforming Liu Che, is going to be outperforming Arthur, is going to be outperforming Zhuge Liang. And let's just jump right into the spreadsheet that I actually prepared for you to kind of go over this, right? So here is the spreadsheet that basically tells you how much active skill damage that you can do in one single skill damage cycle turn. Just think of it as more like DPS chart, if you will. And this is what I mean when I said this is when Qin was first introduced. I was like, hey, like this is the only commander that can do more than 10,000 damage factor from his kit. And let's just go over how I calculated his damage. So this right here is basically saying base multiplier, right? So any damage that he does as like kind of like the total for when you're hitting 0 targets. So like assume that you're hitting 1 target, right? And this is how much damage that you're gonna do for each target, right? With 120 damage factor, which is gonna be coming from the active skill activation, which he'll have guaranteed almost always when you enter combat. And then there will be 1 trigger of his expertise skill, which will do 250 damage factor. And then that damage, if you're hitting just nothing else, it's gonna persist for 10 turns. Now what's interesting is that when you hit 1 target, Qin Shi Huang actually triggers his active skill, his second skill, so that he does. So the way that his second skill works is that it does 1 skill damage with 200 damage factor, which is the damage factor that could have been dealt with auto attack. And then his active skill, when he has that effect, it will do another 120 damage factor, which is the 60% of the base auto attack. So the reason why this damage factor at target 1 is higher than this base multiplier is because Qin Shi Huang will do, let's just move over here. So 200 damage factor from normal damage. Normal damage converted to skill. Yeah, he'll do 200 damage factor, right? And then, and I'm not going to count this. I'm not going to count this damage because this is a damage that you would have done as normal damage anyways. So basic attack would have dealt 200 damage factor. It's just converted to skill damage, which will be amplified by skill damage. Let's just not mess with this because it's going to make things more complicated with all the other commanders too, right? But then again, 200 damage factor, but that is 1 hit of magic. And then his active skill will do 120 damage factor. Active skill effect will do 120 damage factor. So that I can count because that's part of the active skill, right? So that 120 will actually get counted. But if you look at what his kit is, his active skill, his expertise skill will actually do trigger on both of the normal attack and active skill trigger, right? So that means that this 250 damage factor that is guaranteed with his expertise skill will trigger for his basic attack and active skill all in 1 turn. So in theory, if you're attacking 1 commander at a time, you're doing 500 damage factor plus 120 damage factor. So hence, if you do that damage for 10 turns, you're expecting 6,200 damage factor against 1 target. Now, like, don't be skipping around. Don't be skipping around this video and then tell me I've done the math wrong. Just watch this. Like, this is important. And then this is excluding this damage too. This is excluding this normal damage too, right? I only counted those 3 damage factor that you can do in single turn from active skill and expertise. So just, yeah, watch the video fully, please, before you comment and say like you're doing some crazy stuff, man. Because because this is hard to believe. I understand. This is hard to believe. This commander will do 6200 damage factor to a single target every single skill cycle, every single 10-second skill cycle. And yeah, that itself alone is powerful enough to be just counted as 5 target AoE, but it doesn't stop there. If you hit 2 different commander, again, it will do that 6200 damage factor to, so it will do that 250 damage factor, 250 damage factor. Because the expertise does not get reduced by how many targets that you hit unless you hit your 3rd target, right? But that's when this will actually trigger in as the 3rd target hitting, right? So 250 damage factor, 250 damage factor, because of the waning effect, which will actually trigger after you hit beyond 2nd target, it will get reduced by 25%. So it will do 25% less, so 750, 75% of 250, which is going to be 187.5, plus the 120 damage factor they will do to 2 different targets that does get reduced by the number of targets hit. And then that will basically be this damage factor here, 204. Again, I am not counting the 200 damage factor per turn that would have been dealt as auto attack damage. I'm just simply calculating the additional damage on top of that. And with all of that calculation, and I'm basically doing the math, I'm doing addition, right? And then the next target that you hit, the additional 250 damage factor will go down to 50% of that damage, but it will get added to that 10, like the 10-second window. And you're multiplying all of that by 10 seconds. And then once you get to 5 target, that damage factor goes up to 11,775. And that is, by the way, beyond anything that Rise of Kingdoms has seen. This is practically better than having Zhuge Liang and YSG's active skills combined in 5 target. This is same as having Zhuge Liang and YSG's active skill firing off at the same time at 4 target, which is the maximum damage peak that they will have. Do you understand how strong this Qin is now? And the downside of this commander is simple, right? There is no amplifier for this commander. So when you calculate all the amplifying effects of other commanders, the damage factor is only 3,000 more than other commanders. Only 3,000 more than Arthur, only 5,000 more than Joan of Arc Prime, only 4,000 more than Bai Qi. You get the gist. This commander is broken. And no one has seen 11,000 damage factor plus in Rise of Kingdoms, so you may not see it and how broken Qin might sound, but Qin is going to be broken. And not only that, let's say you pair this guy up with YSG, and the amplifier goes to 62%. YSG gains 50% from his Force skill, and then 12% extra from his Relic skill, right? 62% amplifier. Let's say you get 62% skill damage amplification. Then this damage goes up all the way to 19,000 damage factor. If you use Zhuge Liang's 30% skill damage, it goes up to 15,000. So this is actually one of the reasons why I actually have Zhuge Liang and YSG in here, is because if you're using Qin Shi Huang with YSG, you might actually get better result because of how much he does with his total kit and how important it is for you to amplify that massive damage with higher amplification from YSG. And this will change how YSG will be tiered up in that list too. And again, I made this damage DPS chart when I was trying to explain how Arthur is still going to do the most amount of DPS in the game, more so than Bai Chi and Liu Che, if you don't factor in pincer, right? You can see that damage factor of Arthur as skill damage and combo damage commander is still higher than Bai Chi and Liu Che just because of his kit. But if you look at Qin Shi Huang and compare it to anyone else here with 0% skill damage factor amplification in there, there's no comparison. So I really hope that everyone kind of understands now why I'm putting Qin Shi Huang at the very left spot of S plus tier. I get that archers have limitations. I get that archers are slow, they will get focused down by a lot of cavalry stuff, but all that stuff will not matter in my opinion under this much of massive skill damage cycle that you can do in single turn, single cycle. Again, this is excluding the 2000 skill damage factor from second skill that you would have done as normal damage otherwise, which will be, by the way, amplified further by 62% skill damage factor from having YSG in there, and also all those like all those like city skins and armaments, like the wedge that gives you all those extra damage buff, like all that is excluded. 11,775 is a damage factor that he has. This commander is broken. And that's why he's at the very left corner of the S plus. And with all that said, by my own standard that I set myself, I'm gonna actually move Zhuge Liang down to S tier. And I think Zhuge Liang could be one of the best pairing for Qin Shi Huang. Although we just saw how massively different the damage factor is between using YSG as a secondary or Zhuge Liang as secondary, because Zhuge Liang actually have something called Marquise effect that gives you extra damage and also at the same time that like just triggers kind of like crazy. And I think all of that Marquise effect and Zhuge Liang's AoE triggering with Qin Shi Huang's expertise skill, which would also kind of amplify that damage even further. I think Zhuge Liang could possibly still be one of the best pairings that you can bring into the game for Qin Shi Huang. But without ado, and this is going to sound crazy. This is going to sound crazy. I might have to move YSG into the very last slot of S just because of how well he can be paired with Qin Shi Huang. Again, if you're doubting me, let's just put it back in. 62%. Boom. It gains 7,000 damage factor. 7,300 damage factor. That is equivalent of how much basically Bai Chu does with his smite damage. Granted that is smite damage, not skill damage. Adding YSG's buff itself will basically pop out another YSG or Bai Chu into this commander pairing. So, although Yi Seong-ge as a single commander is not as strong anymore, by the standard best pairing or equivalent of S tier, I think having Yi Seong-ge up here might actually make sense. And with that said, I'll have to bump down Hermann Prime probably below Ragnar Prime. Ragnar Prime is still the best commander they can use as skill damage dealing infantry. But yeah, I don't think Herman Prime can be compared to Ragnar Prime in terms of his pure power level. So yeah, oh my god, I was just talking too passionately about this Qin Shi Huang. So if you doubt me, do the math yourself. Like, I've done the math as much as I can, and I try to make it as fair as possible it can possibly be. But yeah, that's how I think Qin Shi Huang will perform. That's how OP that I think the Qin Shi Huang will be in Rise of Kingdoms. And I'll actually move Gonzalo up to S plus tier just because of, I think, the fact that he's doing for one range smite damage, which is going to benefit a lot from the armaments that the V formation has. And also at the same time, he's the only commander that does AoE smite damage in range formation. And I personally use him with this guy right here, John, just for the rage buff. So that a Gonzalo's active skill can just fire off as much as possible, and it just works really fine. But the best pairing, I think, is Gazamada, because they both do ranged normal damage. Oh, God. My neck is hurting now. So I hope you guys get the gist, though. Like, I hope you guys see that, like, this is crazy. Like, this line right here. Just don't look at everywhere else. Just look at Qin Shi Huang compared to Arthur. Qin Shi Huang practically does about 50% more damage than Arthur. 40 to 50% more damage. Even after Arthur gets his buff from amplifying the combo damage and skill damage. Like, it is crazy. But anyways, I hope that, like, I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate after this video is posted, but man, Lilith has released a beast into this Rise of Kingdoms field meta. Anything else though? So archers are moved. Like, the fact that YSG's moved up to here is just crazy, but yeah. Anything else that I will change? I don't think so. Well, actually, because Sugyat and Herman and Qin and YSG will actually be the two pairs. If you were to make just two best pairs that I can think of in my head, I'll move Shazar down to right above Skippy Prime. I think Shazar as a commander, sheer commander strength is pretty high, but it's just the fact that she doesn't have really good pairing to be used as true damage commander, so I'll actually move that up over there. But anyways, I think that's it. I don't think there's anything else that I can fix here. And for all of you who are mainly infantry and cavalry, including myself, just don't get salty with this. Like, just straight up, don't get salty with it. Just do the math. Like I can guarantee you that there is no possible scenario that you will say Qin Shi Huang is not OP. Qin Shi Huang is going to be the best commander in Rise of Kingdoms as a single-handed, like, one commander. Like, it is going to break the damage scale. Period. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know that it took me like 40 minutes for me to actually explore all this math behind it, and then how I think, like, Qin Shi Huang and Shapur will do and all that stuff. So I hope you guys actually enjoyed this video. If you guys did, please go ahead and drop a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, please. And as always, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.